Okay, it is. Thank you. So the basic thing is that I have to add means I have to pass one element from the button.
So it's not for every time. It's just when you the way you have written this code, you have to pass it into the code. Otherwise, if you have a global property, in that case, you don't need to.
So if I want to put the means EZEdit is a global, so what to do?
You just have to assign instead of writing el dot EZEdit, you will just write EZEdit property. But this is fine. This code is correct in this use case.
Okay. Means in everywhere I have to write EZEdit only, na?
Yeah, in that case, yeah. If you have a global property.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Next question is, can we nest components? Yes, we can nest components, and we have seen examples of nesting components when we worked with the property binding, where you have a parent component which passes values to the child component, and that's nesting of components. Okay, so next question is from Lakshmi. Can you show how to set up mock server and yarn build? Yarn build is something for later, but the mock server is something which we are going to set up today, or let's see, maybe tomorrow morning in the tomorrow session. But let's try to do it in the today's session only. All right, so I got a question. Can we? So this question is, okay. We use two-way data binding only within same component. Yeah, so it is only within the same component. So the same component can only send values to the TS code. Okay, so next question is, are there any debugging tools? Yes, there are. I will show you now what are the debugging tools. Next is, we're going to create drop-down, checkbox, autocomplete extender. Those are something which are controls available. Like you can go to Bootstrap, ng Bootstrap. You will find controls for that, or you have to look for third-party solutions regarding implementing these things. So Bootstrap may have controls for these things, or you can check out Material UI. But if so Material UI provides you a way of creating these controls, and also gives you an API, like where you have to set up the API to get the data for autocomplete and all. So you can use these, like these examples over here. Okay. So there is no ready-made solution that which will fit into your requirement. You have to write some custom code on top of it. All right, let's start with the session, and we'll cover new things later on. Okay, let me share my screen here. Okay. So we are starting with module 5, which is services and dependency injection. So we'll just go through the basic theory of it, what we are covering, and then we'll start with the codes handbook. All right. So we're going to cover services. What is a service? Dependency injection of a service, creating a service, injecting a service, and interaction with the database. So yeah, we have interaction with the server. So we have the requirement to create a mock server in the session. So we'll create that and work with observables. So let's start with this. So services are in case of Angular, we can call services as a model, a place where you will write all your data and anything which is reusable. So you can write a function that can be used multiple places. Like, let's say I have a function to validate a credit card number or validate some ID. So that can be used multiple places in my application. So that's a reusable code. So services are going to be created for storing reusable code which is your business logic, your data. So if you are getting data from an API, you will write the logic for that. If you have some hard-coded data, you can write that. If you have any configuration that how your application works, what is different environments for it, you will write that in a service. And also be used for logging information, like just to get a log of how system is working, that can be used with services. So services can be used with your components, they can be used with directives, and they can be used also with your other services. So one service can be nested into another service for sharing the data or the logic with it. Okay. Now, when we are using a service, we have to do a dependency injection. So I'll show you what is dependency injection, but yeah. So services can be used for sharing data, implementing business logic, and interacting with external resources. Like all the data in your application, it's not going to be hard coded in this application. It's going to be somewhere where you will request for the data and load into your application. So that all of the interactions will be defined in your services. Now, in your Angular application, there are inbuilt in your Angular code, there are a lot of services which are inbuilt into the Angular code, and you're also going to be creating a lot of services depending on your requirements too. But not all of the services are used in every component. So like, let's say Angular natively has like 100 services in it. Okay, and you also created another 50 services, but your component does not uses all the 150 services. It uses only like a few of the services, or may not even use any service. Now, to tell a component that you depend on a service, we do the concept of dependency injection. Okay, so what dependency injection does is it allows you to connect a service specifically with a component, and this component can read or write data into the service. Okay, so it can access any configuration in the service. It can access any kind of data in the service. It can access any methods in the service also. Now, if you're writing a code without dependency injection, so this concept of dependency injection is very different. It's based on a concept of IOC or okay. So that concept, what it says is, like ideally when we are working with object-oriented code, where we have to create different classes and use different inheritance for creating different objects and connecting with that. What we do is we create a class, we call the constructor for it, and then we'll say, okay, I have a dependency on the, like in our case, we are creating a wall. So the wall has a dependency on a new brick and a new cement class. So what this code traditionally, this is what we write. We'll say, okay, I need to create a new instance of a brick. I need to create a new instance of a cement and create my wall with this data. Okay, with this all the classes. Now, with dependency injection, the code is a little different. So when we are setting up dependency injection, so what we do is in the constructor, we can just say that I have a dependency on a brick and I have a dependency on cement. And the Angular code itself has a design system which is called as, a design pattern which is called as IOC, which will automatically load the dependencies which I need. So if you want to learn more about this, this is based on inversion of control principle, okay, which allows you to define dependencies, and the system will automatically look for those dependencies and make them available in your class. So you don't have to write that I want to create a new dependency or a new instance to be available in my classes. So just go through how inversion of control works in programming. That will give you a more in-depth idea about how this principle works. Okay, so we're going to use dependency injection for adding dependencies into our components, directives, or other services. Okay, so how do we use a service? It's very simple. Let me open the project and I'll show you if we have any services inbuilt in the project. One second, what's happening? Give me a minute. Okay, this is working. Visual Studio Code. Okay, please confirm me, are you able to see Visual Studio Code on my system? Okay, cool. So let me show you an example which we already have used dependency injection in our code. So we'll go to the component which we have created, the highlight directive which we have created. The highlight directive, this directive needs to access the element that which element this directive is being attached to. So that is being received over here. So you can see we are receiving private EL. EL is the name of the variable, and what we are receiving over here is the element reference. So this code over here is a dependency injection. So you can see how the dependency injection code will be used in different places in our Angular project. So if you're looking for some kind of a dependency, you will create a private variable for it. You will write any name for it. The name should be relevant to it. Do not write something like very irrelevant to it. Just write a relevant name and define which dependency you are looking for. So if I hover on this, this will also give us the information that this is a service which we are using to get the element reference or to get the access to the element. Okay, so this way we are going to be using services in our different scenarios. So let's use a service in our first scenario. Let's go to our app component. Actually, not to the app component. Give me a second. Yeah, so we'll go to the callouts component, the article callouts component. Remember, in the articles callout component, we have this hard-coded data in it. Okay, so I implemented this data over here because we didn't know about services. We haven't covered them. But as an Angular developer, this will be kind of an empty pattern now. So we should not actually add the data directly in our component. We should keep it somewhere outside of the component, and it should define a dependency for this data. So what I should do is I should create a service for this scenario. Okay, so how do we create a service? We can create a service using the Angular CLI. So I'll say ng g s for service, and in the services folder, I want to create a service, call it as callouts. Okay, so all the business logic to maintain the callouts will be written in this service. Okay, so we'll create the service. Now the service will be created. There will be two files for a service. One file is your service implementation. The other one is your test cases. So in the service implementation, it doesn't have any template or any CSS with it because it's just a logical code. It does not have any UI with it. It's a model which we are maintaining. Okay, so it's defined with the injectable decorator. So in our previous building blocks, we have seen components, directive, pipe decorator. In this one, we are going to use the injectable decorator for loading the or creating the service. It has a class. So in this class, we can write public methods, or we can write public data, which can be accessed in our application anywhere we need. Okay, and the name of the service is called as the callout service. So if I want to refactor this code, what I would be doing is I will be removing this complete data from the callouts component. Okay, we'll move to the service and create a property over here. Okay, so we'll write public and write top news as a property over here. This is a public property which is created in my callout service. So this is one single place where all the data will be stored. Okay, so that's the data. Now, how do I use this? So what I will do is I will go back to my component. In the constructor, you have to define the dependency. So you will say I have a dependency on the callout service, so I'll write private callouts. Okay, that's the variable which I want to create. And what is the dependency I want to load over here? So that's the callouts service. So when I say callout service over here, it will also import the callout service from the services folder, and that's been imported over here. Now, whatever data I want to use, I can just write, because now this private variable is going to be created in my code. So all the methods, all the data which is in the callout service is going to be available on this dot callouts. Okay, and now I can say I want to get the top news from that, and I will write this code. And when I run this code now, it will return me the same data, but now it's much more organized. It's been added into a service, and the component who is listening to this data can request for it. So let's say ng-serve, start the project, and we'll get data. Okay, so it's the same thing. It's just now the data is coming from a service instead of directly from a component code. So this is the right way. Do not add too much hardcore data into your components. We should keep the components lightweight. We should try to only have anything which is very specific to the component, like DOM interactions or any template binding in the component, and all the business logic. We should try to move that into a service. Okay, so this is a code for updating the service. So what you have to do is you have to go to the callouts component and update it to have the service. Create the service by using this command, which I'm going to send you in the chat, and move the data into your service by creating a public variable in it. So that's the code for this service also. Okay, so I got a question. Can we call multiple services inside the same constructor? Yes, we can do that. That would be the next thing we'll cover. But for right now, just see this code works or not. Okay, I will also commit this code to GitHub. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. I will give you 5 minutes for trying this. Then we'll continue. Okay, so I got a question. Can we use the same service in multiple components? Yes, we can. That's the main use case. So if you have a service that can be connected to multiple components to share data from them. Okay, so have you tried the code? Is it working? Okay, so one thing we have seen is we have hard-coded data and used in our application. Now, services can also be used for creating methods in them and receiving data from these methods also. So another way is what I can do is I can keep this data in the service right like this, but I will create this as a private variable. So when I create it as a private variable, it will not be accessible in my service over here. So you can see in my component, I cannot access this. It's not available because it's a private variable for this service only. Now, what I can do is I can create methods in it. So I can write a method over here, a public method. I can say get callouts. And what this get callouts does is it just returns the data which is in the service as a private variable. So you will be also doing these kind of implementations where you have some data which is private to the service, but you want to expose that. So what you will do is you will return that data from a method in this scenario. So we'll say get callouts and we'll return the data from here. Yeah, so over here, now when I need to use this, I'll just say get callouts and that will return me the data which I have. Okay, same thing. Just now there's a method which returns me the data. Okay, so why do I need to implement like this way where I have the data returned from a method? There can be different scenarios. Like let's say you are writing a method which will only return you specific number of records. So this code right now returns the all of the data. What I can do is I can say a variable over here as rows and how many items do I want to return from this code. So I can write a simple array change on it. Okay, so it's going to be splice. Okay, and over here, I will say I want to start from 0 and how many items I want to receive in that data. Okay, and we'll set this value to be default as 4. So it will return all the 4 records, or I can ask for specific number of records from the code. So I can write 2 over here. So when I write 2, it will return only 2 records in the data. So methods can be used for receiving parameters, and based on those parameters, you can return specific data back from your service. So pretty simple. So the callouts, in the callouts, if I say I want to receive 3 items, it returns me 3 items. And how does it? It goes to the callouts method, get callouts method. In the get callouts, we have the same data, but now we are doing a splice on it. So we are breaking the data into smaller parts based on how many rows are being provided to the data. And we can return that much of data from the array. Okay, so that's why methods are very useful when you are working with a service. So you can write some logic which can do some manipulation or even receive some data from the API and set this up for you. Okay, so please try this out with the method. I will send you the code for these. Okay, so any questions on this? Any questions on the service implementation? Is it clear with everyone? Okay, so if you give more than 4, it will just return you 4 only, because there is only 4 records in the system. So even if I give like 20 over here, so it will only return me the 4 records. So it doesn't matter. If you extend it, it will just return you the number of records which you have. Okay, so that's the maximum. It will not create new records for you. Okay, so that's how we implement services in our code. And the main use case of adding services is to create HTTP requests. So this data which I have right now, this is hard coded in my application. And we don't want hard coded data in our application. We want the data to come from a API, like from a server. The server will return us the data and we'll use that in our application. So how that complete workflow is implemented. So let's first discuss on that. So how it works is, let's say I have my application over here. This is my app. The application has callouts in it. Okay, and the application also has a service in it. Okay, so we'll create a service. This is our callout service. Okay, now the callout service is going to be is right now connected with the callouts component. So there is a connection with this. That okay, there is a callout service which we have connected. Okay, now you need to get data from an API. So when I say API, there are different meanings to it, but for a web developer, API is something which returns you a XML data or a JSON data. And for creating an API, there are again different ways for it. Like there can be a GraphQL API, there can be a REST API, there can be a RPC API. All of them, the main fund of them is that they will always return you some data in the form of a JSON or XML. So widely these days, we use a way of implementing APIs using REST. Okay, so let's say I have a REST API in my code. Okay, this REST API is going to provide data for my application. So on this REST API, there will be different URLs which are going to be available. So as a backend, so this is not your job to implement them. It's going to be a job of a backend developer to implement them and provide it to you as a URL. So this is in a case of a front-end developer. If you are a full-stack developer, then you should be creating these APIs in your specific language. Like if you are a Node.js, .NET, or Golang developer, whatever backend language you are comfortable with, you will be creating these APIs and providing the data. So here, so we'll say, okay, I have a REST API. The REST API URL will be something like slash. So it will be like HTTPS, your domain, whatever domain you have, the zone you have. Okay, and on this, you will say my API URL is going to be API slash v1. Generally, this is way how we write API URLs. We'll say API slash v1 slash the name of the API would be callouts. Okay, this will be a API. Now, when we work with REST API means it has 4 different methods based on HTTP. So if you have worked with HTTP protocol, the HTTP protocol has 4 methods in it, which are commonly used. Actually 5 methods, but 2 of them are generally combined. So 4 of these methods are get, post, put, or patch, and delete. And why are these 4 methods available? So get method, like the name says, it's for getting data from the server to the client. So when you need to access or get some data into your application, you will call the get method. Post is when you want to create. So how we write them is, we say get is for read. Okay. Post is for create, when you need to create some records. Okay. Patch and put is for update records, when you are updating something. And the last delete is for deleting some records. So we'll say delete this. And now a very common term which we use when we are working with REST APIs is that we are making a CRUD operation, C-R-U-D. So how it is defined from? So let's reorganize this. So C means CRUD, that's the create. Read is the R. The update means U, and D means delete. So that's the CRUD operation we are going to do. So these are the 4 things which you will be able to do on an API. Okay, so setting this up is a job of a backend developer, and they will provide you some URLs that, okay, this is the place where you can make the data request and get the data, or even post data to them. So I have this callouts. Now, in our case, for the callouts, I should be making a request to a URL, which would be something like the backend. You will say that you have a URL. Let's do one thing. Let's do small cleanup over here. Move it over here. You have a URL over here, which is get URL, which will be for getting data from the API, which is the callouts API. And your service, what it does is, your service will send a request to this callouts. Okay, so it will have a logic to send a request to the callouts API and get the data from them. So how that is done? So that is done using another service as a dependency. So another service also has to be used. So what we do is, the callout service will not have the code of making the API request. That will be defined in a different service, which is our HTTP client service. So let's move this a little bit over here. So the HTTP client service is a dependency of the callout service. So when you use the callout service, the HTTP client service has to be injected into it. So we'll say, okay, I will inject the HTTP client service in my callout service. And the HTTP client service is capable of doing the HTTP requests to your server. So now this will send the request to the APIs. So this is how the flow works. So you create the callouts, the callout uses the callout service. The callout service internally uses the HTTP client service as a dependency, and the HTTP client services calls the API and gets the data to you. And this is going to be communication which is bidirectional. So it sends a request, gets the data. Over here also it triggers a method, gets the data, and it also exposes the data over here. Okay, so this is the flow which we need to set up to get the data. Maybe it sounds very complicated, but it's just few lines of code which you have to implement. So I am not a backend developer, and also assuming you're not also a backend developer, so you don't know how to write APIs. But for trying this code, we still need an API so that we can make a request to it and get data. How we can do that? We have to add a package in our application that is called as a JSON server. So this JSON server package allows you to create mock APIs using a JSON file. So you just create a JSON file, keep the data in it, and it will read the data in the file and create APIs for you. So this is only for development. It is not production ready. So do not deploy your applications on production with us. Just a mock data. I will search for that. It's an npm package. So we'll say JSON server npm. and this is the package which I need to use. Okay, so how do we install this? We'll go to the project. In the project folder, in the terminal, run the command npm i JSON server as a save dev. So it's a development dependency. So we'll save dev over here. Okay. So run this. Okay, so this will create the setup for JSON server in your project. It's still not updated, so we have to set up the JSON server with it. So we'll make the changes. 1 second. Let me just check the packages in file. Yeah, it's installed. Okay, so once this is added, then I have to create a new file in the project. I will call this as db.json. So this is the database file where all the data will be stored for this project. Okay, so this is again a temporary setup for mocking the API. It's not production ready. And we have to create a JSON data for this. So give me a minute. I will give you a code which you can use for this. I'm just putting line on mute. Give me a minute. Okay, so I was looking for data for it. We'll create it by ourselves then, it's fine. Okay, give me a minute. We'll set this up for you. Okay, so I found the data which we need to use. So this is this template. So I will send in the chat. So create a db.json file and paste this data in it. So actually I was looking for this whole template. Now we already have, I've created this earlier. So we'll use this as a data source. So just copy all the content which I've sent into your code. Yeah, I am committing the code to GitHub also. Just 1 second. Okay, so one thing which you also need to do is once this file is added, we have to use this file with JSON server. So we go to package.json file. In the package.json file, go to the custom scripts, and we have the Edureka JSON data over here, which is added. Okay. Okay, so once you add this in the JSON file as a custom script, we can use this file as a as our mock data. So what we need to do is, let me delete this. We don't need this. We have the JSON server. The JSON server is not going to pick this file, but it's going to pick the file which is db.json. So we're going to use this file. So actually, sorry, I have to update this. Just use this one to create the API. Now we'll do a complete code commit. Let me just check if things are working fine, then I will do the commit. Okay, to start the development server, I will run a command which is npm run dev server. And yep, the dev server is working, and we can see it has the APIs available for us. Okay, so that's good. Now I will commit the code to GitHub so you can use this. Okay, so what I did is update the packages.json file. So I added dev server. So this was change which I have to do. So I've added this code. So I've already committed this in the chat in the GitHub also. And you have to create a db.json file. And in the db.json file, you will just paste whatever content I've sent you earlier in the chat. So just paste that into this file. If you're not able to access this from here, you can check it from GitHub also. It's much more easier to find access it on GitHub. Okay, once you're done, let me know. You can get the data from this file also on GitHub. Okay, let me know once you're done. I will wait for 2 minutes and then we'll continue. Sachin, you have to add this code which I sent you in the package.json file. Go to package.json file. There is a script section. In that, at the last, you have to add this. So if you already have this, just replace this with the one which I've sent you again. All right, so I think everybody has done this change. Now, to start this server, you have to go to a new terminal. So do not close the one which is already running for the Angular app. Go to a new one. In this new terminal, run the command npm run dev server. I've sent in the chat, please check. So run this command, and once you run this command, it will show you that you have few APIs which are available. So on the localhost 3000, you have the news API, users API, ads API, and the top news API. Okay, so these are the URLs which are available from which we can get the data or post the data to them also. Yes, you can run this command in the VS Code terminal. Just create a new VS Code terminal by clicking press this plus icon and leave the terminal which is already running for Angular project, and the new one run this command. Okay, so now we have to use this API in our project. So see, these are the URLs on which we are going to get the data. So first of all, we have to configure them like as a configuration in our project, so that we know that what URLs are available and where we are going to get the request data. So what we do is, I will create another terminal, and in this new terminal, I will run a command to create a new service, and we're going to call it as configuration. Okay, so that's our new service for creating a configuration. So that's the command for this, and it will be created inside the service folder, which is called as configurations now. The service is called as configuration, and in this, I'm going to add the configuration of what URLs are available. So what I will do is I'll just copy them from here and create a public variable URLs equal to object, and on this object we are going to define what URLs are supported. So we're going to say first one is for all the news. So I'm going to create a key over here, which is going to be news, and the value of that is going to be like this. So we'll say news. For the second one, that is for users. So we'll create an API for users. Write users. The third one, that's ads. Okay, next one is going to be top news. So we're going to say top news and write like this. Okay, now in this code, there is one thing common, that all of these API URLs have localhost 3000 in them. So I will break this also over here. So I'll create a new property and call it as base URL is equal to localhost 3000 like this. Okay, and now I will update these with the template literal over here. So right, this is the base URL for this. That is going to be this dot base URL, and we're going to replace this for all of these APIs. Okay, So this way we create a configuration that what is our base URL where the API is going to be available, and what APIs are available. So actually this should not be base URL, it should be API base URL. So which should be very clear that this is for the APIs only. Okay, so this will create a configuration that what are the URLs which are supported in our application, just a configuration. Okay, now we are going to use these for making the API request. So the data which we are looking for is the callouts data, the data which we are going to use for the callouts API service, and that is going to come from the top news. The top news will have the 4 news articles which needs to be shown up in the top news. So what we do is, first of all, let's remove the hard-coded data. We don't need this. Okay, so in our diagram earlier, what I showed you is where is it? That you have to set up the HTTP client service as a dependency. So what you do is, over here you will say private HTTP and has a dependency on HTTP client. Okay, so if I write this, I'm not getting the HTTP client over here. The reason is, by default, the HTTP client is not available in your Angular project. You have to import the module for it. Please remember this, it's a module which we have to import in the app module. So we'll go to app module. Over here, we're going to say import from Angular common /HTTP. And we're going to import the HTTP client module. Okay, and that will be added into your import section. So without this, your API calls will not work. Okay, so import the HTTP client module in your app module. Now go to the callout service, and over here write HTTP, and you will get the HTTP client from Angular common HTTP. So this will now start working. So once you have added over here the HTTP client, we can make the HTTP request to this. Now the point is, where do I need to make the API request? That data is in the configuration. So here I will write, I want to import another service. So I'll write comma private, and this is going to be my config. And what I want to inject is your configuration service. Okay, so that will be available in my code. That will give me the URLs which I want to call. And in this code now, we'll write this.http. On the HTTP, you have methods, that which method you want to call. So what type of request you want to send to the server? So I want to get data, so I want to send the get request. So I'll write get. And what is the URL on which I want to send the request to? So that will come from the config.urls.the top news URL. Okay, so we'll pass this over here. Now, one thing about API calls is that API calls are asynchronous. So they are going to take some time to retrieve the data. They are not immediate because there is a network request which will go to the server. The server will get to the database, read the data, and return you the data. So that means it's an asynchronous request. You trigger the request now, and sometime in the future, you will get the response from it. Now, in case of Angular, when we need to receive the data from an asynchronous request, we receive it as a observable. Observable is a special type of object which is created in Angular using RxJS. RxJS is a third-party library, and it creates an observable on which we can listen to data. So we can listen to the data which is going to come in the future or later on. Okay, so the output of this code, if I show you the output of this code will be a observable. So if you go to the get method definition, so we'll see you will receive a observable as output. Okay, so now on an observable, what you do is you subscribe to data. So we'll say I want to subscribe so I can listen to data whenever it is available, and that is going to be done in our component. So we'll go to the callouts component, and this callouts component where I'm calling the service over here, get callouts. I will write dot. Okay, so one thing, I need to return this get method from here. Then only I can subscribe. So write this dot subscribe. So there will be a subscribe method which will return the data in the future. Okay, now it will receive the data. Now I cannot assign this directly to the variable in my code. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll remove this code from here, and the API call is a expensive operation, and it has to be called only once. Ideally, it has to be called only once in the life cycle of a component. So which life cycle we can use, which calls a function only once? Yep, we can use the init. So I will move this code into my init. So this will, when the component gets loaded, immediately it will trigger the API call and provide me the data in the subscribe method. So in the subscribes callback over here, I'm going to receive a response. And this response is the data which I'm going to get from the API. So let's write console.log and see what is response going to be. So run this code on the browser, it will work. Okay, I'm not getting the callouts, that's fine because we don't have the data attached to it. But if you go to the console, you will see there is an array which is returned, and the array is coming from the articles callout component, and that is coming from the console.log. So what we are getting is the 4 articles which we have for the top news. So those are listed over here. Okay, so this is the data which is coming from the API. So how do I make sure that it is actually coming from the API? So you can just go to the network tab, refresh it, go to the network tab, and in the network tab there is a fetch and XHR. So get to fetch and XHR, and you will see there is an API request which is sent. So the request is sent to localhost 3000/top news, and the response for this request is the JSON data. You can preview that over here. So you can say, okay, yeah, there is 4 records which are returned, and yes, the request is successful, and we are able to get the data from it. Okay, so we use this data now. So this is the response. So what I can do is I can write in this code, I will be writing this dot news equal to response. So whatever response I'm getting, assign it to the this dot news. And now the code will start giving me errors that you're assigning the object is not assignable to this new article. So whatever response has been returned from here, it is not allowed to be assigned to the news. The reason is because the data which we are receiving, it's coming from an observable. So we have to configure the observable to tell us that it is going to receive the article data. So very simple. So it's just a TypeScript thing. We have to go to the get method, and we'll write over here that it's going to return observable, and the observable is going to have article array returned from it like this. Okay, so we say that, okay, the get method is going to return. So we are typecasting it over here. We can say the get method is going to return an observable. The observable internally is going to return an array of articles. And now the error will be gone. And we can, okay, so it's still giving this error. That's fine. Then we can do one thing over here also. We can say this is going to be article array like this. Oh yeah, my mistake. Actually, I don't need to write observable over here. I can just write article array like this. No, it will be fine. Yeah, then I don't even need to write this because I forgot that it's already returning observable. So we don't need to tell TypeScript that what observable it is, what is return. We just have to tell that it's going to return array from the observable. So now the code is fine. It will work. And if you go to the browser now, you should be able to see the 4 callouts which were earlier into the code. So now when I refresh, see, when I refresh now, it sends a request. Once the request is completed, then this information is shown on the screen. So it waits for this request to complete and show information for the user. Okay, so you can try this out. I will do one thing. I will send you this code. I'll first commit this code on GitHub. So this is the article's callout component and the callout service. So this and the configuration service file. So these are the three files which are updated, and based on these, the API calls are done. The module file you can all update by yourself. You can just go to the app module and say I want to import the HTTP client from Angular Common and use that. So Somna, did you install JSON server? I've given a command for that, npm I JSON server -- save dev. If you check in the chat, there will be a command for that. So this is the command which you need to use for installing JSON server. So first install JSON server, then only the command will work. Okay, so I got a question. What is the observable and what and its use in real scenario? So this is a real scenario. This is going to be used. I will cover what is observable in more detail. There is another few slides on it. But first, try it out. The main thing which you need to first remember is the API call returns you the data sometime in the future. So if you send the API call, it depends on the network connection, it depends on the database, depends on the server. And that is something which you don't have any control on. So what we know is when we send a request, it's an asynchronous operation, which will return us the data in the future. And to receive this data, we have an observable. So observable is a type of an object which will be updated in the future with the data. And whenever it is getting updated, we listen to the subscribe method. The subscribe method will tell us that the data change has been done. So we implement the subscribe on that. Okay, so that's why I have to say subscribe and get the changes. Okay, so try this out. I will give you 5 minutes for it, then we'll continue. Hi, Ron. So have you tried the code? Any questions on it? Somnath, you're already unmuted. You can unmute yourself and discuss.
No, no problem. My question is that that API is a intermediate part between the client and the server.
Somnath, your voice is not clear. Can you be a little loud?
Hello, am I audible now?
No, it's very feeble. So can you be a little loud?
Am I audible now? Hello,
No.
hello,
Yes, Somnath. Let's try again.
hello.
Yes, Somnath. Please say what's your question?
Yes, yes. As API is the intermediate part between the client and the server. Means whenever he will request something, he will request through the API. So the API which you have taken, in that API, all the data is present. So what is the basic difference between the API and the database? Because everything means, as we know that the API is just a URL part that will hit to the go to the database and fetch the data from there and give it to the client. So my question is that what is the basic difference between the API and the database? Because in API, what you have taken just now copy pasted it is present. It means it is having all the data.
Okay, the API is not going to be developed in your Angular project because we are learning Angular, and I'm assuming nobody has backend experience, and we don't have time to create a complete API server and write Java or .NET code in it. So that's why the API code is actually in the Angular project. But in your actual application, when you go to your office, create a new application for yourself, it will not have this code in it. It is only for your mock. It's a mock server. Okay. Your backend team will give you these URLs. They will tell you that, okay, hey, this is the URL from where you can get the data.
Which URL you are talking about that you have written in .ts file?
This URL which you have now, like here back. So
Yes,
see,
yes.
you are making an application. So your backend team will give you a list of URLs. They will say, okay, I have a URL for callouts. I have a URL for getting news. I have a URL for logging in the user. All of these URLs are going to be provided by your backend team. Okay, so are you clear with the concept of backend and front end?
That is okay. Means I am telling you that how the real API look like. So that's my question. That what is the basic difference between the real API which is used in the industry and the database? Because the things which you have written down here, all the data is present in that API. So that was my question.
Sorry, I didn't get your question again. Your voice is breaking. So can you repeat again?
Actually, I was having a doubt between the difference between the API and the database, because the data the things which you have written here, it is present in all the data. So I thought it should be present in the database only. And API should be like an URL. So that was my question.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, because we are learning to create a mock. Okay, but when you are creating a production code, you will not have this data in your project.
So could you please show me that how the real API look like?
The real API, you can just go to
from Google only.
just say JSON placeholder. Like your backend team will say, okay, we have these APIs, this over here. There are 4 APIs. They will return you some data, and you will make a request to. You will use this URL to send a request to it. It's just the same thing. Okay, or you can just search for like Twitter API. So if you go to Twitter API, they will give you APIs for doing different things. So they will have a list of APIs what are available like these, and you can say, okay, I want to get data for a specific thing, or yeah, here it is, the endpoint map. So these are the APIs provided by Twitter also. So this way, your backend team is also going to give you a list of URLs from which different data is going to be available, and you will call those URLs and get data from them. Okay, so in your production application, like when you are creating this application for your client or your company, you will not have these data files in your project. They will be meant like they will be just provided by the URLs will be provided by you. The URL will say, okay, this is the API URL, and where is the data going to come from? So this kind of a documentation they will give you that, okay, we are going to implement a GET request. The GET request will return you the data. This is the URL for it, and what kind of data it is going to return. What are the parameters in it? This is the example response for it. So everything is going to be done by your backend team. They will give you this detail.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Everybody is clear with this? What is the API and why we are using it? Great. Okay. Thanks for confirming. Okay. So we have our API being called. So this is the code which we are getting the data from. This is the function. This function returns us the observable. Okay, so I got a question. Why are we using JSON server, not JSON server JSON placeholder? The reason is the JSON placeholder has its own way of setting up the data, and I don't want to set up my project on it. I just want to show it to you how you can create your own mock server. So that's why I'm doing it. Okay, so Sheikh, yes, we need to run the db.json file. So that is done through the scripts over here. So in the script section, add this dev server and run the command npm run dev server. That will run your project. Okay, so I have this person. So please change your name actually. Why you're keeping this as Edureka guest? So please change your name back to your actual name. It's very confusing. I'm sending you the request for screen share.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes. Roy, actually, I didn't get the data in the front end.
Can you share the screen?
Can you see my screen?
No. No, I can. Yes, I can. Okay, so did you start the server?
Yes, I have started this.
Okay, great. Okay, let's go to the browser. Let's see what's happening.
Yes.
Do a right click, inspect.
Yes.
Network. Okay, refresh the page. Okay, is it showing that you're making a call? Yeah, the API is failed. Click on the top news in the console. Yeah. Why is it failing? Okay, it's not found.
Fine.
So go to the code. Yeah, this is the Angular application. The other one. This is also the Angular application. No, this is the Angular application. Where is the API running? So both of them are actually running the Angular app.
This
So
is
stop one of it.
my project.
Okay. So where is the API running then? Go to the third one.
This is where I am creating my files.
So you have stopped the API, no?
Yes, and
No,
this
so
is
you already
another
have
company.
stopped it. Okay, so you are not running the API. So go to the third command prompt. See, you have stopped it.
Yeah.
So
A third
start it
command
again and then try the code. Sorry?
Go to the third commandment. Okay, okay.
Yeah. So you can see clearly that the API is already stopped over there.
Just copy the
npm run dev server, dev-server.
npm run.
Dev-server. Dev-server. There is no space with it. Yeah. Now go back to your project in your browser.
Yeah, I get the data.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, so I got a question. Okay, yeah, that's available. That's fine. All right, so we have created our API. We used it in our project. That's great. Okay, so now let's take a break for 10 minutes. I will not be on the screen. So if you are sending any questions in the break, I will not be able to answer them. Hi everyone. Okay, I'm back. So let's start with the session. So what we have covered is we have seen how to add an API to our project, like to our component, using the first of all, we created an API. In our case, we have called it as callouts. In the callouts API, first example was I hardcoded the data into the API and create a method which will return you the data, which we have done. Added the API. So this step over here is not required now. After Angular 8, this step is not required. We don't have to add the API in the providers. So we can skip this. And the next was adding the API into our component by adding a private variable, writing a name of variable, and writing a dependency injection for the API, which is that, and updated the UI to show the content from it. So that's done. So we are also able to get the data for the callouts like this. Next thing was making interaction with two APIs. Like if you want to have two APIs interacting together, so how we'll do the dependency injection. So we also have seen that by importing the HTTP client API in our project. So we added the HTTP client, and that was added in the callout service. And we also have a configuration API, which is for providing the configuration for this project, like URLs, base URLs, and all. So that's done. Okay, so we've seen how the communication works. The next thing is observables. So what is observable? So first of all, when you're working with API with the backend, like we have seen, we have a mock backend, which is the JSON server JSON server, which returns the data. So what it does is the JSON server creates a server, a mock server, in which our Angular application can send data to it. So in our case, I have kept the files for the API in the Angular project, but we can add it to some other place. That also is fine, but just to save our time, added the API code in our Angular project only. You can also use any third-party APIs also, like JSON placeholder is another example. We can use that too. I was not using JSON placeholder because it's not matching with the same data which I need to use in my application right now. So I skipped that. So server is created. The responsibility of the server is to read the data from our database. So in our case, the server is created using the JSON server. So what is the database now? The database is a db.json file. So it's a file which gets converted, like which gets read by the JSON server and creates an API based on it. Okay, so your Angular code cannot connect with the database directly. So if you have this assumption that we have a MongoDB or a MySQL database, I can connect my Angular application directly to it. No, you cannot. You have to send a request to the server. The server will send this request to the database, read the data from it, and return you the data back. Now, how this whole transaction works is we have a component. In our case, the component hits the HTTP API, like something which triggers the HTTP. So our HTTP client gets called. So the component sends a GET request using the HTTP method to the server. Now the server responds the data, whatever you're looking for, and makes it available. So the Angular code, once it loads in the Angular code, the HTTP client makes the data available as an observable. So observable is again, I'm telling that it's an object which allows you to read asynchronous data. So data which is available right now, or anything which is going to be received in the future. So observable is going to be used for that. We can subscribe observable. So observable is a type of object, and we can subscribe to it. Okay, so it's like if you have heard of the pattern which is called as pub/sub pattern or observer pattern in programming, it's following the same principle. Okay, so what you do is you subscribe to it. You tell that, okay, it's like a news service, like a newspaper service. So every morning you get a newspaper. So the newspaper company doesn't give you the newspaper for free. They charge you something. Okay, So how they charge you is based on a subscription. So like say you go to times.com and say, okay, I want to sign up for the New York Times. And on the New York Times site, you will say, okay, there is a subscription. You have to pay like $1 for it. You will subscribe, you will provide your email address, and you will be a successful subscription setup of that. So whenever the New York Times publishes a newspaper, it will come to you as an email. Okay, so what you have to do is you subscribe and you get the data. So in our case, the same principle is used over here. The observable is our newspaper company. Okay, that's our New York Times. Whenever New York Times publishes something, we are the subscribers, so we get notified that there is a new news article and we want to read that. So that's our subscribe method. The subscribe method will tell us that, okay, yes, there is a new information and we want to use that. And then once we get that information, we can assign it to a public property, we can assign it to some other method and do some calculations on it. Okay, so observable is based on the PubSub pattern or the observer pattern in programming, which allows you to observe data. Now, observers are not inbuilt into the Angular code. They are coming from a different library. So if you go to packages and file, you will see there is a library which is added over here, which is RxJS. Now, what is RxJS? So RxJS is a library which follows the principles of reactive programming. Okay, so just go to Google, just search for RxJS over here. Okay, so this is the library which helps us to run the whole Angular application. So the whole Angular application depends on this to provide you data or provide you access to different information in it. Okay, so it's a very big library, so it's very hard to cover everything in it, and not everything is going to be used daily. So you can refer it by yourself also, but today or the later sessions, I will cover some of the things which are going to be used in a day-to-day life. Okay, so it has like hundreds of methods in it, and it's impossible to cover all the 100 methods, like hundreds of methods in these sessions. Okay, so I got a message. What is the difference between observable and subscribe? Again, I think you're confused, like what is observable and subscribe? So let's take example again, the same example as a newspaper company. You are, or as a magazine, like let's say you are interested in cars, and you are going to subscribe to a car, like car magazine. So how it works is, let's say there is a cars magazine. Okay, this car magazine publishes new cars which are in the market every month. Okay, so how will you get the news from them, like which cars are released? So you will do one thing, you will subscribe to them. So how will you subscribe? They will give you some email address where you have to send an email and they will subscribe you in, or they will publish a form. Okay, so what you do is you tell them that I am interested in your magazine and give me information. So you will be one of the users. So you will be one user over here, one user over here, like this. Okay, there are multiple users which are interested in these magazines. Now, what you do is there will be a connection between them now. So this is going to be connected over here, and this is also going to be connected over here, like this. So whenever the car magazine publishes a new magazine every month, what it will do is it will know that I have two subscribers. I have subscriber 1, subscriber 2. These are the people who are interested in the magazine. So what they will do is they will send you an email. How they will send you email? Because you have already provided your email address by showing interest to them. Okay, so it's a real example how it works. Like you are interested in newsletters, you will say, okay, I'm interested. This is my email address. Whenever you publish something, give me the details. Okay, so that is the concept. Is it clear? Okay, now let's now convert this into our Angular code. So now instead of the car magazine, we have an observable. Okay, so this observable is created when we call the get method. So when I say http.get, this observable is created. Okay, so this observable is lying idle in the code. It's not being used. Okay, so it's there. Now, when you call the subscribe method on it, so this observable, let's go to the code in the service. And this code from here creates the observable. So it's over here. Okay, so it's not doing anything. It's just an observable which we have. Now, when you say, I want to subscribe to data, I am interested in this data. So how will you show your interest? You will call the subscribe method on the observable. So where I'm calling the subscribe method, I'm calling the subscribe method over here. So when I say subscribe, that means I'm interested in this data. I'm showing interest for this data which is going to come. So okay, so there will be one subscription which is going to be added. So there will be subscribe. And in the subscribe, I will have the method, the callback function, which will do something. So a callback is something like you received a magazine. What will you do with it? You will read it, maybe, may not read it. So there are different steps to it. So that part is your callback. Okay. So when you subscribe, you are showing interest that I am interested in this data. Once the data is received, what you want to do with it. So that's the callback part. So this function will be called with the response. And it's up to you that what you want to do with this data. You want to assign it to public property, you want to not do anything with it, or whatever you like to do. This is something which you have to write in this code, in this function. So that's your callback. Okay, so it's very similar to how a magazine subscription works, where you have observable, you subscribe to it. They will say that, okay, we have released a new magazine, you will receive that, you will read it, or you will just throw in the bin. Okay, so same thing. This is my observable. This is where I'm showing the interest, that I'm interested in this data. And this is what I will do with the data once I have received it. Is it clear? Is it clear with everyone? Okay, so now let's go back to the content. What we have is we have seen how observable works. Now, the same example is over here in the slides. So this is our milk factory, and there is a supply which goes to a shop. The milk factory provides the data to the shop tells it to the different subscribers. So over here, these are the people who are interested in milk. They will subscribe to the milk service from the shop. And whenever the supplies come to them, it will just distribute to the right people. Okay, so a service, when you call the method like get, post, delete, put, any of these service methods, they all are going to return your observable. And on this observable, you will get the information that what's happening with the information. Now, the subscription can be done by multiple components. So if you have created observable, multiple components can observe to it, and they will receive the same data in that case. So in this example, like if I'm creating a subscribe, if I have 2 people subscribing or 3 components different subscribing to this data, whenever the data comes in, it will come to all of these 3 components. So all of them will receive the information. So it's not that, okay, only one of it will receive, all of them will receive the same data when the subscription receives the data. Right? Now, how does the API call works? So API, when we make an API call, we send a GET request. Get request will get the data, convert that into observable, and we receive the observable and use it in our app components. Okay. Now on the subscribe method, there are 3 stages which we have. So we have the next state, we have the error state, and the complete state. Okay, so I will show you these states, how they are used. And before that, I will show you an example. Like I have got this as a question also, that what if I am receiving this data from an API and I want to show a loading screen in that case? How will you implement that? So very simple. What we can do is, we can just write that I have this array of articles. It can be an array or a null value. And by default, I will start with a null value, that I don't have any data. All right. I will go to the HTML, where over here I'm receiving the news. I will write a condition. So I will say ng if this is true, like if the array has data more, if this is true, okay, then show this. Otherwise, I want to show some loading screen. So there is a else case also which you can add. Okay, so write else. And what do we implement? What do we want to implement in the else over here? So for this, we create a template. So write ng template. Okay, we'll name this template something. So we have to write a name for it. So we'll say it's my loading template. And in this, whatever I want to implement. So over here, I'm going to write loading top news like this. Right now, I will write the name of the template after this like this. Okay, so if this condition is true, like if the news is present, then the news content will be shown. If the condition is false, the loading template will be shown. Okay, it will immediately replace that. One thing I would do is I need to create the same structure actually. So we'll write this over here. Okay, so just to be in the same CSS structure, so I have to write row and column in it like this. Okay, run the page. And on the browser, where is the page? Sorry, where is it running? Okay, so it's immediate. I'm able to see it immediately over here. But what we can do is in the JSON server, there is a setting to add a delay in the request response. So let's see which parameter we have to define. Yeah, so there is a delay parameter which we define so that it delays the API response. Right now, it's very fast. It hardly takes like few milliseconds, although few milliseconds is very less for us, but for a computer, it's quite fast. So we'll just add a delay in our configuration. So we'll go to the package.json file. In the package.json file, we have added the script. We'll add delay. And what are the possible values for it? It's milliseconds. So how many milliseconds you want to delay? So I'll say 2000. That's equal to 2 seconds. So every response which we're getting, that will come in 2 seconds. So you send the request, wait for 2 seconds, and then the response will come. Now let's try the same thing. Okay, it didn't work because I need to restart the JSON server. So I'll stop this and run the command again, npm run dev server. Okay, so it started with the delay now. So it has a 2-second delay. Let's go to the browser and run the API request again. So now it shows loading news, top news. and then it loads the data. So over here, you can see the data. Now you can say, I want a spinner. So you can download a GIF file. So you can say, I want a spinner like this. Which one you like? I just pick any of them, like this one. So it says save image as. Go to my desktop. This is my project. In the SRC assets, I'll create a new folder. Call it as images. And in this, I'm going to create a loading.gif. Okay. And I have the GIF file. Now I can write the GIF file in my template. Over here, right, image, SRC, where is this image coming from? So that will come from assets/images/GIF. Okay, so now go to the browser, load the app again. You will see this loading image. Wait for 2 seconds, it will load the image or the data. It's quite big, so we'll just set some height to it. We'll say height is 32, width is 32. So just a small icon. And you can see, yep, it's a little small. It's put 64 like this. So you can see there is a image icon which shows over here. Yeah, this way you can just add a loader. Okay, so I got a question. What is ng template? Did we cover this? No. So this is the first time we are covering ng template. So ng templates are used for writing if and else conditions. So if you already have seen by writing the ng if you want to add a else condition in it, then you have to write a template. In the template, you will write the content which will replace the if condition. So if the if condition is true, this content will be shown. If the if condition is false, this content will be shown in that case. So it's a if and else scenario for the page. Okay, so you can try this out. I will send you the code and let me know if you have any questions on it. Okay, so this way you will implement a loading. Okay, so I got a question. Which backend API we will use for this and upcoming projects? I mean, some API have JSON Web Token after like a login. So I will show you how to send the JSON Web Token and how to access the JSON Web Token using the JSON Server Auth only. So we'll be using this only in our examples. Okay, so try this out. This is the code for the callouts, just to change this to null. Okay, so try this out. I'll give you 5 minutes for this, then we'll continue. Server, can you show example in the upcoming scenarios? I am not sure what is jet token, but I will show you some scenarios with JSON Web Tokens by using the JSON Server Auth. It will cover that how the JSON Web Token has to be sent, how it gets verified, everything. Don't worry about it. But coming up with a specific scenario with .NET or something is not relevant, because as an Angular developer, you don't need to worry about what application or what language is used for creating the API. It has to follow the right schema for it. Next question is regarding the ID. Okay, so this over here, that what is this hash ID? This hash ID is a way of defining a variable in your HTML template. Okay, so we don't generally use them, so they are only used in the case of ngIf and in the case of ngIf else, or when you're working with forms. So the forms example which you have done, that is still incomplete because we have only covered the two-way data binding for it, but we haven't covered the complete setup of a form. That's done in the next session. Okay, in that also we need to use. So the only use case of this is for creating a variable from your template, and this variable is only accessible in your template level. It will not be accessible in your TypeScript code. Okay, so just a variable which points to this template, and we write a name for it. All right, any other questions? Okay, coming back to the assignment, we still have a lot of time, so we'll cover a few more topics. I was just looking into the assignment. Have we covered all of the things regarding this? Yes, we have covered all the things. So if you want to go through the assignment, you can later on. But for the today's session, we'll just see what we have covered, what's left. Okay, so we'll go to 40. Yeah, so we are creating the weather service, and that was the last example. Okay, so we have kind of done with the content. We have seen how to interact with the API, create our mock server and everything. Now, in this, there was a slide which shows us there are 3 types of methods on the subscribe or subscribe handlers over here. And we'll just see why and when they are going to be used. Okay, coming back to the drawing which I have. So in this drawing, I'll just go to this section over here. Okay, so in our application, when you are creating an app, so let's create a new one. So we have the application over here. This is the app component. In the app component, do you remember the @output and @input? Yeah, so it's used for communicating between components. Okay, so that way of communicating between components is simple when you only want to communicate between 2 levels. Like if I have app over here, and from the app, I want to communicate to component 1. I can, like over here, let's say I have this component 1 and I have component 2 over here. Okay, I can easily do this. I can just say I will connect to this and I will connect to this. Perfect, easy. Let's say now you have created another component level. So now this is component 2.1 and the 2.1 component has component 2.2 after it. So there are now more levels of nesting. Okay, and the same happens over here, but this one has more complications to it. So this one has 1 and 1.1, 1.2 like this. I'm just creating a structure. Okay, and this one again has another level which communicates. Okay, so this is how different components are going to be set up in your application. So this is the this is not a very rare scenario. This is a daily thing which you will find in your components. Now, let's say your component over here, which is this blue component, needs to communicate with this component. So how will they communicate? Think of a way. Yep. So till now, what we learned is we only learned about components are going to have inputs and outputs. Okay, let's cover this way only. So first, if I want to if I want to implement using input and outputs, let's see how that will work. So let's create a box over here. The red box means the output. Okay. So I will add this red box over here. So first you will set up output from here. Then you will set up output over here. And then you will set up output over here. Okay. Sorry, this will be the receiver. So this will be handling the event. So this is our topmost parent because see, they are coming from two different trees. There is no direct hierarchy over here. So what you'll do is you will send the output over here, and send the data to this app component. The app component finally has the data, what you want to send. Okay, that's over here. Now, for each level, then you again set up inputs over here. So we'll say input and another input over here. So what you did is you did set up 4 different kind of steps or 4 different handlers just to send data from one place to another place. Okay, it works fine. Till our limited knowledge, we are able to implement this properly and things are working fine. But now there is another requirement that we don't want this component. It has to be removed. So we remove this and this component comes over here. So when this component gets removed from here, I will just create. So when this component gets removed from here, then you again have to change the outputs and inputs. So you have to remove this one and the communication has to be again changed. So that's another very big problem. And it's a very common thing that in your application, you're changing the component hierarchies depending on different implementations. So there should be a better way because this is a very, very basic setup, like where you are having 3 different levels of component. The application which I have worked in, they have like 50 or 60 different levels of components which are being sharing data. And that's kind of impossible with this kind of a flow. So what we do is we create a service. We create a service over here which will host our data. So you can create one service, you can create like 10 different services for 10 different things. So I can say I have a login service. I have my new service. Actually, instead of login, I will call it as user service. This is my cart service or checkout service, which will handle all the checkout services, news and user. Now, instead of writing this as a component 1.2.1, let's name it something. Let's name it as login. So when the user logs in, this component logs in the user, and this component over here is our header component. And this is our username. That I have a username which I want to show. So like when you go to Edureka or any other application, you will find your name is listed over here. Let's try it on Google. Okay, so if you go to Google, you see the sign in button. When you click on sign in and you do the complete sign in, your image icon shows up over here. So if this was an Angular application, once the sign in component loads, it will log me in and I have to replace the header with the user icon now. And it will be a problem because it's not coming from the same component hierarchy. So what we do is we say, okay, yes, we'll implement a user service. The user service will communicate with the login component, and the login component will also communicate with the username text on the screen. So when the login happens, the login component updates the user service and provides it the user data. the user data, once it has been set over here, it will update the username over here. It can be also connected with other components. So over here, let's say you have articles, and in the articles, they have to get data based on a specific user. So it will also provide you the data over here in the articles component. Okay, so these will be, once the login happens, the user gets the data. It has to update the article component and the username component to pass in the relevant information. Now, the services cannot directly do this. There is another layer which you have to add. So what you have to do is, inside the service, you have to create your own observable. So what you do is, let's take this, and you will say, I have a observable which is for the user. So it's a user observable. This user observable will hold the information of the user, and different components can listen to it. So how? In these components, they will implement a subscribe to them. So over here, I'll just create a box over here. We'll just say I want to subscribe to this. Okay. In these components, we'll write the logic for that. Okay. Same would be done in this username component also. So this user observable is going to be connected to a service. The service is going to provide the data to it, and that will be subscribed by our different components. So we are going to learn how to create observable and share the data from one component to multiple components on the screen. Okay, clear with the requirement? Any questions? Okay, so I'm not implementing the login flow. It's just going to be a demo kind of thing. So let's say, let's see our UI. How does the page looks like? Where is the page? Here it is. Over here, this is my header. So the news, Edureka news section. In this header, I want to show my users data. Okay, so first we'll go to the header. In the template, we are printing the application name. That's the user, Edureka news. In this, I will create a p tag, and I will just write user name comes here. Okay, just a placeholder to know that where is the data going to come. So this is the place where I want to show the user data. And where is the login form? Let's say that the login form is over here in this section. Okay, so let's create a login form. So the login form will be created, which is that section over here. Actually, I don't even know. Let's go to component. Yeah, we have the login form component over here. And where is it shown up? Oh yeah, here it is. Already I have a login form component. That's perfect. Okay, so what I want is, whatever I type over here, it should be shown up in the header. Okay, so the first thing would be, I have to create this service because all the other components are already there. I have to just create this service for the user. So let's first create this user service. Okay, how do we create a service? We'll run the command services/user. Okay, created. Here it is. Now in this service, I want to create a observable. So in RxJS, if you go to RxJS, there is a type of observable which is called as behavior subject. So we are going to cover behavior subject today, not any other type. Let's look for it. Where is it? Behavior subject. Yeah, here it is. So a behavior subject creates a observable, and this can be used by different components to listen to the data changes. Okay, so this is the behavior subject. So I want to create a new observable using it. So I'll go to my service. In my service, I will create a public property, public user is going to be equal to behavior subject. Okay, equal to new behavior subject. And in the behavior subject, you have to provide a default value. So I will write a default value as null. So right now I don't have any user data, but it gives me an error that I need a type for it. There is no initial type for it. So I will write a type for this data. So we'll create an interface. Actually, we'll create an interface in our interfaces folder. Let's say user.ts export default interface. And that's the user interface. Okay, what data will user have? It will have the username. It is going to be type of string, and email, which is type of string. The username is going to be an optional value, so I'll just write question mark in front of it, and that's it. Right, so that's my behavior subject, and I will write user interface over here, or the null. So it can be null, or why is it saying like this? Actually, then we can create another thing. Okay, give me a second. How do we fix this then? Either if it is null. No, we're not taking null over here. Okay, it's fine. If it doesn't take null, what we'll do is we'll create default value. So this is the default value. So let's just say the email is the default value, and email is empty string. So for right now, it works fine. Okay, so this is my behavior subject, which is available. Now I will go to my header component. In the header component TS, I will say I want to use this behavior subject. I want to listen to this observable. So I'll write private user column user service. Okay, and in the ng on init, I'll write this dot user. So yeah, I have to actually, let's rename this to user service. So from the user service, I will get the user behavior subject. So this is my behavior subject. You can see over here, it says it's behavior subject. Now, because behavior subject is also observable, so you can listen to it. So you can write subscribe and listen to the changes which are happening on it. And I will create a public property, and we'll call it as user email equal to empty string. And I will assign this dot user email is going to be equal to the data which we get for the user. So we'll get a response, right? Response dot email. So whatever the subscribe is going to return, I'm going to assign to the user email property of my component. And I will use this user email property where I have the placeholder content for showing the username. Oh, sorry, the user email. Okay, so one thing, yeah, that's done. Now I have to use this service in the login component. So I'll go to the login component, the login form. I'll write private user service. I'm going to use the user service for this and access the data. Okay, so that's here. Now, whenever I am typing in the control, so I have this input boxes. There are two input boxes on the screen. In the email box, whenever I'm typing in it, I want to update the behavior subject for it. So what to do is I have to capture the type event. Like whenever I'm changing the value in it, I have to capture that event. So that is done through the on change event. So on this input, the input for the email, I will write a change event. And over here, I will handle it by calling the on change method and providing the event information to it. Okay, I actually don't need to pass in the event information. I can implement it over here like this. Okay, so I'm just knowing, I will just write over here console.log on change called. Okay, let me show you. So when I'm typing in this input box, it will call the on change over here. Yeah, so on change get triggered actually when you exit out of the control. Okay, so it's getting triggered. 1 second, we can do one thing. We can actually use the key up event. Yes, then. Yeah, better would be using the key up because key up is triggered whenever you press something and release the key up event gets triggered. Okay, the on change only gets triggered when you exit out of the control. So I don't want that. I want to trigger it immediately. So you can see there is this on change which is happening now. The key up is happening. Okay, so whenever I type something, this email change method will be called. So in this method, I will write a code. I write this dot user service dot user, and on this is the observable. Okay, but on this you will get few other methods which you want to use. So I want to use the next method on it. So the next method is used for updating the value of the observable. So currently, when this observable was created, it has this as the default value of it, the email, which is empty. But I want to update this value whenever I type in the input box. So I will call the next method on it. So I will call the observer dot next method. And in this, I will pass in the updated value. So the updated value would be email, sorry. And in the email, the value of it is going to be form.email. So there is a login form property over here, which is capturing the data from ng model. So I will just write this dot form.email, whatever the value is coming from that, assign it to the key, which is email, and set the observable's value for that. So it's updating the value whenever I type in it. And I think that should be enough. We'll go to our browser and go to the form and type in something over here. Scroll up and you can see the same data has been shown up over here. So whatever I'm typing, as I type, the value gets updated on the header also. So it's a communication between two components by using a service in the middle. And in that service, we have a observable. whenever some action happens, I'm updating the observable, and the observable notifies all the other components that the update has been done. Okay, so that is what we are implementing. So it follows this principle where the login component tells the service that tells the observable in the service that update the value by calling the next method. When you call the next method, the value gets updated and the value goes to the components which are listening to it. So in our case, the header component is listening to it, receives the value and shows the value on the screen. Okay, is it clear?
Hello, Puneet.
Hello?
Hello, am I audible?
Not clearly.
Hello. Right now?
Can
Hello?
you bring your mouse? Can you bring your mic to near to you?
Yes, yes, it is near to me only. Now I am audible now?
Yeah, better.
Yeah. So I'm asking that can you go to that page where you have created the observable? So you have taken a dummy observable by that name, behavior. Can you go to that page? No, no, where you have added that observable from the net.
I can't clearly hear you, whatever you're saying. What's your question?
Hello, am I audible now?
Yeah, a little better. Hello? Can you type in your question? That would be better.
Yes, am I audible now?
Yes. You have to ask your question. You're audible now. Don't hold the line. Okay, I will continue. Poonam, I got your question. We have done the same with in the past with the same component. It just now we are using the communication between two components. We are using a service for it. Yes, you're right. So we did the same thing in the past with input and outputs where we're communicating. But with the input and output, the requirement is the communication can only happen if they are in a kind of a component hierarchy. So the communication always goes to the parent and then gets as an input to the other side. In our case, the example, if we do it with input and output, this will be the outputs. I can just write over here output. This would be output. The app component will receive the data and it will pass in the data over here in the value as input. Okay, so this is a quite complicated flow. So instead of that, we created a service. The service has an observable. Any component in your application, anywhere, no hierarchy is required. Any component anywhere can listen to this behavior subject in the service and react to it. Okay, so I got question from Somnath. The question is, I'm asking the behavior part is only a dummy observable. Is it mandatory to take? It is not a dummy observable. This is how your communication will be done across multiple components. So that is, I have explained the complete flow on the workflow over here. Like when you have multiple components and you want to communicate between them, sharing the data with input and outputs is very complicated. We create a service. In that service, we create an observable. We allow any component in our application to listen to that observable. And whenever we want to change the data, we call the next method on that observable to update the data. Whenever the data gets updated, any component which is listening to the data will update its UI. So how it is done? In the working code over here, you can see the login form component has this user service in it. The user service has this method user service.user. The user is our behavior subject. You can see in the tooltip over here that it's our behavior subject. On this behavior subject, I'm calling the next method. And in the next method, I have to pass in the next value. Like what is the new value which I want to assign to the behavior subject or the observer. So when I say this is the new value, that value is going to be assigned to it, to the behavior subject. That's the observable. When that gets assigned, any component which is listening to the data or subscribing to the data, the observable will be notified. So in our case, the header component is subscribing to the behavior subject. So see, same behavior subject, which returns a user. Now we are subscribing to it. When you subscribe to it, it will return you the data for the user, and you will get that data. You assign it to any public or private property and show that on the screen or do whatever logic you want to run on that data. Okay, so that's going to update. In our case, it's updating the UI. So the two components are not in the same hierarchy. They are not using inputs and outputs. They are communicating using the service. Okay, is it clear? Somnath, is it clear now? So Poonam, is it clear? I got your question also. So is it fine now? Anyone else has any questions on it? I know this is a complicated topic, but this is the way how Angular actually manages the data. So it may take some time to learn, but don't worry about it. We have a lot of sessions to cover more use cases of this. Okay, so now we have seen there is okay, I got a question. I didn't see anything like this in React.js. No, we have this in the React.js also. So in React.js, if you have worked with Redux, Redux does the same thing, where you publish action, the action goes to the reducer tells your component the data has been updated. So the same thing, it's the same thing. It's just it's kind of the same thing, but in a different way of interaction. Yeah, so this is also Kumar, this is also a local data. But in Redux also, you can keep this information. Like if you want to communicate between different components, you can do the same thing with Redux also. So I think once you get a hold of it, you will feel like it's the same thing. It's just a different way of doing it. Okay, so can you take one example with the same? I will cover with another example. In the next session, we are going to see how to create a login flow. In that, we'll see how to use this complete flow for the API. Cool. Okay, so I got a question. What is a behavior subject? So behavior subject is a way of creating. So if you go to RxJS site, sorry, but I can't cover anything like the complete RxJS because it's huge, and it's another like kind of a complete series for itself. We are going to just cover few things from it, which are very important to us in the daily development. So one of it is the behavior subject. So there are few things, like there are 4 types of subjects: async subject, behavior subject, there is a replay subject, and a subject. So these subjects which we have, they are used for creating observable. So if you see, a behavior subject is just for creating observable as output. Okay, why we are using it? We can use the observable object over here directly and create observable with it too. I can create it from this code also. But if you're using the direct observable object, it's little different to handle it. So the preferred would be to use the behavior subject or any other subjects to create this observable. Okay, so just for creating observable. Now, why do we have 4 types of subjects? That can be a good question. So the behavior subject is the one which takes a default value. Okay, so the default value means when you create a behavior subject, it will accept a default value, and whenever you subscribe to the behavior subject, it will always gives you the current value in the behavior subject. So whatever value is currently available on subscribe, it will always provide you that. The other ones, they will not. So if you are creating a normal subject, it will only provide you a value once you have subscribed and a new change is done after the subscription. Okay, so that's one other thing. And then you have replay subject. Replay subject is for replay subject is for it's going to hold few values in the system, and it will return you those old values if you need. Okay, we'll cover them in the later session. Don't get we have another complete topic for this. I'm just covering out today because we have plenty of time left, but in the next session we have the RxJS and the HTTP client, the complete walkthrough of it again. So we'll cover that in detail in the next session too. So don't worry about if you're not clear with this, try this out, and in the next session we'll revise this complete topic again. Okay, so I got a question. What are these capital T, which are defined over here? So these are keywords which TypeScript uses to transfer a type from one place to another place. Like what this means is like your behavior subject, sorry, the replay subject, whatever type is going to be received over here, that is also going to be passed to the subject as a type into it. So just to represent that one type over here is going to be passed into the other extended class which we have. So that's been added over here. So instead of because when you're using a behavior subject or a replay subject, they don't have any specific types. They will be based on what interface you're passing to them. So that can change. So it's not a specific type. Whatever type you have received, that will be used for extending or passing it as a returning the value. So instead of hard coding something, it's just a way in TypeScript to define that's a type which we have. Okay, so any other questions? Okay, so guys, please complete the assignment. The assignment is quite simple. I'll show you the assignment which you have to do. Not this one. Yeah, I think, yeah, this one. So this is the assignment which you have to do. You have to create a service. In that service, you have to just keep some hard-coded data in it. Okay. And from that hard-coded data, you have to create a table like this. That's it. Not very complicated. It's just you have to keep some data in the service only. No need to make an API call. We have done the logic of how to make an API call, but you don't have to do that in the assignment. Now coming to the feedback. So in the last session, I got a very harsh feedback. I don't know why, but I will just want to, I don't know who has given this feedback, but I will just read it out. And just give me a second. I just want to clarify on that feedback. So I got a feedback. I sounded very harsh. So it was instead of logs in late, but wraps up the class early, not using the 3 hours properly between topic, and takes a break and doesn't answer the question. So one thing is, if I'm taking a break, that means it's a break. I'm not sitting on the system. I want to step out, have some water or walk a little bit. So I will not be answering the questions in the break. Coming in to the logging late, I always log in first. I generally log in 15 minutes ahead of the session. Always start a timer. The timer is always started at 15 minutes before the session, and it overlaps 5 minutes from the session. So there is generally, we have a leverage that the people may not join immediately, and we give them few minutes to join in and settle down. So that's why the session starts like 2 minutes or 3 minutes late. And we always cover three hours of the session. Okay, and not asking questions or not taking questions. I take all the questions. Everybody in the session, they ask me hundreds of questions. I'm always taking all the questions. So if you're sending this kind of a harsh feedback, just look into it, what questions you have sent me and what I haven't answered, and look at the time that I have covered the complete session in the whole 3 hours were consumed in it. Okay. So if you want to drop out, the content for today is done. But I have few questions coming in. I will just answer them, then I will end the webinar. So if you got some other work, you can just leave the session for today, and the content for today is over. Okay, so the message is from Edureka guest. Yeah, you can share your screen. I will send you the request.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you see my screen?
No, still loading. Yeah, now I can see.
Yeah, actually, I have made assignment which I given. It's I am editing my data and update the data. But I got an error that when I'm clicking on edit button, it will all row will be edited.
Yeah, because you are maintaining a global state. A global is edit property, like kind of a property. When you set it to true, all of them controls will be set to true. So I think Somnath has implemented this earlier, where only each of the record has this property. So you can do one thing. You can, when you are iterating the records, go to the template. See, you have done one single global property which hide shows the content. So what you can do is, instead of keeping it global, you can keep it at the item level also. So instead of writing is show edit, write item dot show edit, and that will create this property on each of the record. Okay. And for each record, you have to maintain that. So you have to accordingly, you have to adjust it.
Something like this.
Yeah. So something like this.
What is showing me?
And you have to, yeah, this property is not there, so you have to update the interface also, that which record has been enabled or not.
Will you please help me out?
Yeah. So, okay. So go to the interface. Where is the interface? Yeah. So create a new property over here. Is what was the name? Is show edit. Create a new property over here. Is show edit.
Show edit. Okay.
And type of it is Boolean. And it's an optional property. Yep. Question mark. Yep. Perfect. Okay. Go to the HTML. Okay. Now, wherever your written is show edit, replace this with that property, that show edit property. So item dot show edit. Okay. Okay. So the other ones, the input boxes also have to be changed.
Yes.
So these will be changed to exclamation
Show
mark item dot show edit.
Exclamation mark
Item dot show edit. Okay. That's
yes.
fine. Now go to the edit and line number 43 and 46. In these two methods, pass in the item to it as a parameter into edit employee and update employee methods. Now line number 43 in the method name.
Yes.
Pass a parameter item in it.
Item.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So which item you want to update? In the other one also. Same thing in the other update employee also. Okay. Okay. Cool. So now go to your TS. TS code employee.ts, employee component.ts. Now, yeah, in these two, receive the argument. You will write employee. In the line 46, receive the argument. Call it as employee.
Employee.
In the round brackets, right? In the round bracket, the brackets. Yeah, right. Employee. This is one single employee. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And replace this with employee. Actually, delete the two lines which you have. The next two lines, line number 48, 49. Delete them. Okay. In this now write employee dot. No, in the body.
Yeah. Employee dot
Is show edit is equal to true. Show edit, yeah, equal to true. And do the same thing in the other ones. Set it to false.
update in update.
Yeah, in the update also. Yeah. You're getting this error on line number 46 and 40. Sorry, line number 46 and 50. It's looking for the type. So assign the employee type to these variables. So write employee colon employee. Yeah. Yeah, this employee type. Do the same for the other one. Okay, now on the code, it should work. Save the file.
All are in edit.
Okay, click on update. What happened? Click on update. Not working. Now click on edit. Okay. The code kind of is reversed. So we have to go back to the code. So where you have the ng if, no, it's fine. Over here, it's fine. Once again, edit will be, okay. Yeah. So go to the template. So in the span tag where you written ng if, just write exclamation mark in front of them. Yeah, this will be not condition. So this will be set to not. You have to, I think Visual Studio Code will not pick this. You have to do one by one. And the other ones, remove the exclamation mark.
This one?
Yeah, remove the exclamation mark in all of them.
Okay.
Now try this. Man, what's happening? Yeah, now it's click on edit. Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Click on update. Okay. Cool then. All right.
Rohit. Yeah. I just want to ask one question. We have set the interface will show edit boolean, right? In employee.ts file, we have just defined that the employee value in edit will be true, and in update it will be false. Okay.
Yep.
Getting reference from what is this employee?
This is one single employee. So when you write a loop, like in the for loop, if you want to get one single record, you got the employee in the ng for, and now you're passing one single employee to this function. So you can update anything on that one single record, not all of them, but just one single record.
Okay. We can define it's a variable, it's a property. Employee.
It's a argument which you're receiving into a function. It's an argument. It's a simple argument which you receive in a function. Okay.
Single argument we will be getting the interface employees.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Welcome. See you. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.